somewhere along your awakening journey. At some point along your awakening journey, maybe after a profound spiritual realization, or perhaps following a complete emotional breakdown, something inside you shifted. You couldn't quite explain it, but you felt it. The world you once knew began to unravel before your eyes. You started seeing through the illusion, the routines, the noise, the masks people wear, and then came the silence. In the beginning, that silence felt powerful. It gave you a sense of clarity, a strange sense of empowerment. You weren't just thinking differently, you were seeing differently. But then something unexpected happened. Slowly, without warning, that deep sense of meaning began to dissolve. Not suddenly, not with drama or fireworks, just quietly, like fog rolling in at dawn, muting the colors of your soul. It was as if your inner world had turned down the volume on life itself, and forgot to turn it back up. You stopped chasing things. You stopped caring, not in a reckless or self-destructive way, but in a deeply existential one. Like an old soul letting out a long, weary sigh, and then, almost out of nowhere, the questions began to whisper louder. Why do I feel so numb, now that I finally see the truth? It's a strange and painful paradox. We're told that spiritual awakening should ignite us, fill us with purpose and fire. But for many, especially those who are deeply introspective, highly sensitive, or naturally empathic, it often does the exact opposite. It empties you. It strips you bare. I remember talking with a close friend, a brilliant mind, spiritually tuned in, always diving into the teachings of Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Krishnamurti. She was one of those people who got it. Then came her awakening, an intense, soul-shaking experience after what she described as her own dark night of the soul. She told me she finally saw through it all. The ego, the false identity, the endless chase for external validation. And yet, just 2 months later, she was lying in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. No tears, no drive, just nothing. She whispered to me, I used to cry over not achieving enough. Now I don't even care if I achieve anything at all. I thought awakening would light me up, not leave me like this. This isn't rare. In fact, the renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung saw this phenomenon decades ago. He never used trendy spiritual buzzwords. But he understood. He understood the psychological toll of waking up to a deeper truth. He once said, enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It sounds poetic, beautiful, even, until you realize what it really means. Awakening isn't the end, it's the beginning. The beginning of a kind of psychological death, a death of your old self. Your old structure, your perceived identity, the dreams you once pursued, the roles you played, the career paths, even the idea of time and personal progress, they all start to crumble. But here's the twist Jung pointed out. Your ego isn't destroyed, it's disoriented, it's lost, it's wandering without a map. And when the map is gone, so is motivation. Suddenly, all the things that once moved you, goal setting, personal milestones, achievements, feel hollow. It's not that you're failing. It's not that you're lazy. You're in limbo. You've awakened from something, but you haven't yet awakened into something else. And this in-between space, is where things get truly interesting and deeply misunderstood. Because what you're feeling right now, it's not failure, it's not depression in the clinical sense, it's not something broken inside of you, it's something ancient, something sacred, something most of the modern world fears and tries desperately to avoid. Carl Jung warned us about this stage. He called it the sacred pause, the void, the threshold between identities, the place where your old self dissolves, and your authentic self begins to take form. You used to want to prove yourself, to be seen, to succeed, to be loved, not just a little, but deeply, fully, unconditionally. And you know what? That desire wasn't wrong. It was completely human, a natural part of development. As Carl Jung described it, it was your persona, the mask you wore to survive, to fit in, to play your part in society's grand performance. But then something changed. The awakening happened, and suddenly, the mask no longer fit. You weren't interested in impressing anyone. You weren't chasing validation or applause. Not because you gave up on life, but because you saw through it. You saw the game for what it really was, and once you've seen the game, It's hard to keep pretending to play. That's when things start to get strange. Without the mask, your old dreams and ambitions no longer make sense. They were designed for the version of you who needed approval, who believed success was the goal. But that version is gone. Now, it feels like you've stepped off the stage mid-performance. The lights are still on. The crowd is watching, but you've forgotten your lines, and worse, you don't even care to remember them. That's why you feel unmotivated. Not because you lost your fire, but because you outgrew the fuel that once ignited it. Jung believed we weren't born to endlessly serve the ego. We're meant to integrate it, to align the fragmented self with something much larger, something sacred. He called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of transforming from a scattered identity into a cohesive, unified being, not the surface level, me, that chases attention, but the deeper, eternal self, rooted in soul. And that self, it's not interested in chasing status. It doesn't crave praise. It doesn't even need clarity. What it does crave is truth. So, once awakening begins, your entire psyche starts shifting. Without needing your permission, it begins rejecting everything false, forced, or ego-driven. You'll notice it in the things that suddenly drain you. The job you once loved. The relationship you once clung to. The ambitions you carefully cultivated on your 2021 vision board. Gone, not because they were bad, but because they were based on a self that no longer exists. This is why spiritual awakening feels, at once, both freeing and deeply disorienting. But Jung had a warning for us. Don't stop here. Some people wake up, and then get stuck. They fall into a trap known as spiritual bypassing. They begin telling themselves that nothing matters, that it's all an illusion anyway. And so they disconnect. They float. They numb out. They confuse detachment with disengagement. But the self, the deeper, wiser part of you, wants something entirely different. It wants to live through you. It wants to bring the eternal into the everyday. It wants to use your hands, your voice, your breath, not to escape the world, but to transform it. The self doesn't reject the human experience. It redefines your relationship to it. But to truly embody that, you have to pass through a strange, murky, and often misunderstood middle zone. Jung described this phase perfectly, though few people recognize it while they're in it. There's a phase after awakening that almost no one talks about. It's not glamorous. It doesn't show up in neatly filtered Instagram quotes or in photos of you meditating in sun-drenched barley fields. No, it looks like this. You, sitting in silence, unable to explain yourself. You, watching the world speed past you while you seem frozen in place. You, wondering, what now? Jung would say, you're not lost. You're in between. You've stepped away from the ego, but you haven't yet learned how to live fully from the self. And that in-between space? That strange stillness? It's not a flaw. It's not failure. It's a rite of passage. But we live in a hyperproductive world, one that mistakes stillness for laziness and quiet for paralysis. And so, you start judging yourself. And that judgment? It's the very thing that blocks the return of your inner power. Jung had a name for this psychological shift. He called it an antiodromia, the process by which things turn into their opposite. In the wake of awakening, your inner pendulum swings wildly, from ego-fueled ambition to soul-level stillness. You go from, I must do everything, to, why do anything at all? And as strange as it feels, this swing is sacred. It's how nature restores balance. In mythology, in ancient spiritual teachings, this moment is known as the hermit phase, the symbolic death before rebirth. It's the moment when the caterpillar dissolves into nothing inside the cocoon. It's no longer a caterpillar, not yet a butterfly, just goo. And no, goo doesn't check things off a to-do list. It doesn't build empires or publish life-changing manifestos. It simply dissolves. And this is the moment where the ego panics. Your ego still wants answers. It wants action, identity, a clear direction. It demands a sense of movement, a purpose to chase. But deep beneath all that noise, yourself is whispering something softer, something wiser. Let go. I'm building something deeper. And this is where most modern spiritual teachings skip the hard stuff. We're often told to just follow your joy or stay high vibe, as if discomfort means you're doing it wrong. But that's only half the truth. Yes, your energy and intention matter, but Carl Jung would have looked you in the eye and said, if you try to skip the darkness, you skip the gold. Because the gold? It's hidden in your shadow. Jung believed that real transformation, the kind that actually makes you whole, requires what he called shadow integration, the slow, sometimes painful process of facing all the parts of yourself you've repressed, denied, or buried. This isn't optional. It's not spiritual extra credit. It's the core curriculum of being human. That empty, sacred stillness you're feeling right now? It's not failure. It's the space your psyche has finally made for what's been unconscious to rise. You're not broken, you're metabolizing. And your inner world, in all its wisdom, knows exactly what it's doing. It's why your motivation has stalled, why your drive has quieted, why even your sense of clarity feels out of reach. Because your psyche is not trying to rush you forward, it's asking you to slow down. To feel, to witness, to reclaim what you've spent a lifetime avoiding. This is the real work. And here's the beautiful twist. When you stop resisting the void, when you stop judging yourself for being in this space, something unexpected begins to shift. Motivation comes back, but this time, it feels different. It's not a frantic push. It's not performance. It's not fueled by anxiety or fear of falling behind. It's quieter now, older, wiser. It's a soul-led movement that doesn't feel like chasing something outside yourself. It feels like remembering something inside you. Jung called this the emergence of the self, not as an abstract idea, but as a living inner compass that starts to guide your life. You've passed through the fog, the silence, the in-between, and now, deep within, something stirs. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand. It's a gentle pull, not toward your old life, but toward a new one. This is when the self begins to speak, not with words, but through resonance, through symbols, through quiet knowing. It shows up in what Jung called the symbolic life, a life where meaning replaces striving. And your internal world begins to shape your external one. And here's the irony. This life of deeper truth, it often looks beautifully ordinary on the outside. When the self leads, you don't hustle to keep up. You respond to what feels aligned. You're no longer fueled by the fear of missing out. You're guided by what deeply resonates. You don't need to force clarity. You recognize it when it shows up, like a familiar song you forgot you loved. Living from the self doesn't mean you'll always feel clear, energized, or inspired. You'll still have days of exhaustion, of confusion, of sadness. Because that's part of being human. But what you won't feel is the constant ache of betraying yourself. You'll stop dragging your soul through a life that no longer fits. Instead, you'll notice something subtle and sacred begin to emerge. You create, even when no one's watching. You say no to what doesn't feel true, even if it makes sense on paper. You follow your curiosity rather than your checklist. You choose peace over performance. This is the new fuel. It's not adrenaline. It's alignment. Jung called it living symbolically, not in fantasy, but with soul. You begin to trust the language of your dreams, your gut feelings, your synchronicities. You start to live not by rigid plans, but by quiet inner guidance. So, what does this look like? Really? Sometimes, it's just about asking different questions. Not, what should I do? But, what's quietly calling me? Not, what's the plan? But, where is life nudging me? Not, how can I prove myself? But, what feels honest? You shift from trying to control life, to participating in it. And no, that doesn't mean you abandon ambition, it means you transform it. Ambition becomes devotion, to truth, to presence, to the unfolding of your soul's work. And the surprising part? That kind of energy, the one rooted in authenticity and alignment, gets more done than ego-driven effort ever could. But now it's sustainable, now it's soul-powered. This is the self's version of motivation. Not to impress, but to express. And it often leads you to teach, to build, to heal, to serve, not because you should, but because your entire being is whispering, yes. So if it feels like your spark disappeared after awakening, maybe it did. But maybe it was supposed to. Maybe the fire you once carried burned down so a deeper flame could rise. One that doesn't flicker every time the winds of the world blow. Carl Jung never promised the path of becoming would be easy. But if you're still here, listening, reflecting, feeling. You're already on that path. This isn't about getting back your old drive. It's about discovering a new one, rooted in truth, wholeness, and soul. This isn't the end of your awakening. It's the beginning of your becoming. If these words resonate, if they help name something you've been quietly carrying, share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what your own journey has felt like. And if you're drawn to explore more content like this, where we make the invisible visible, where psychology meets soul, be sure to subscribe to Mysteries of the Beyond. Because awakening? It's not where the story ends. It's where the real story begins.